You wake up and it's 2007. Summer just ended. You're about to start school. It's August. The sun is starting to go down earlier and earlier. Summer's over, but there's something on the horizon. BioShock 1. The hype that was created around BioShock 1 was greater than most of the other games that were coming out at the time. Now think about this for a second. It's 2007. We're talking about games like Halo 3 comes out that year, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the first Assassin's Creed, Team Fortress 2. Now, obviously, all incredible games in their own right. However, what made BioShock 1 so incredible for having that kind of level of competition? In 2002, Irrational Games, under the direction of Ken Levine, started working on development of this game, BioShock 1, right? In its earliest stages, BioShock was just a small idea. And the expansion really did take quite a lot of time because they started from scratch. So throughout 2002, those next 5 years up until 2007, the game development process was very involved for all of the team members. They went from putting it in different settings until they ended up deciding finally on Rapture underwater and finally deciding on the narrative that would follow up. And that is something that developed as they created the world. And they highlight a lot of this information in lots of the interviews that they did for the game. And along with creating this narrative, they also worked a lot on the actual character design, all the voice lines. And the big thing here was that things changed so drastically from their initial ideas. The characters were originally going to be much more unique. The developers even describe it as Scooby-Doo-like. So monsters from Scooby-Doo is kind of like what the first ideas were. However, they had 5 years to refine that idea, and they decided that after playtesting the game themselves and seeing these monsters come to life in their world, they wanted more emphasis to be on the story and to be on the environment than to actually be on the enemies. It was all the way up until 2007, only a few days before the developers say that they still hadn't even created an intro sequence to the actual game. Initially in the game, you're supposed to just start in the water right after the plane crash. There's no plane crash sequence at all. Now, the director highlights the fact that when they did playtest, they felt super, and I will quote this, they felt depressed. They felt like the games didn't give you the time to get introduced or to get hooked in and to care about the characters and to understand, what is even the importance of me being here? Without that introduction sequence, it feels like there's no stakes at all involved for the actual player. That plane crash scene ended up becoming the catalyst for what the story ends up becoming throughout. And through this intro sequence, the player begins to realize that the character that they are supposed to be driving for this game has a lot to lose. Now, why was the game actually so popular? What really set it apart in comparison to all those big games we already talked about? Well, the size of the developer was quite small, right? Irrational Games had only done one decently sized game before that, and their expectations for this game in particular were pretty similar. They didn't expect it to really explode like it did. Another thing that really set the game apart that people were it piqued a lot of people's interest was the actual art style and the music and the actual sequencing of the game. Even in trailers, you could tell that this game was going to be presenting something to the player as an experience that hadn't been done before and that they hadn't seen before. Along with that came the character design. When the Big Daddies were first introduced, they were clouded in so much mystery that the player felt the need to play just to find out what was going on there. And I'd like to also highlight that the developer really enjoyed making the good ending of the game with the little sisters being saved and where there's a link between our character and the little sisters at the end. However, the studio that he was working for, that was funding all of the projects that they were working on throughout that 5-year sequence, they required that there had to be multiple endings to the game. But the developer said that he was really disappointed that there had to be multiple endings because he felt like the overall concept of having no choice, he wanted to highlight that through the ending of the game. You figure out your name is Jack. You feel like you have some kind of purpose, and you're in a plane crash. After the plane crash, you're met with this massive lighthouse in the middle of nowhere as your only source of life. And within it, once you explore, once you go down, you see this bathysphere that will take you into the unknown. And that's where you discover for the first time the city of Rapture. There's information popping out at you left and right. There's a man named Andrew Ryan who built Rapture in the 1940s originally. So he's like the founder. There's statues of him everywhere, and his name comes out left and right, left and right. And you also learn that the scientists of Rapture discovered a sea slug while they were studying during this time period. And this sea slug had stem cells that could be used to rearrange human genes. And this was referred to in the game as Adam. But Adam, in short, can grant abilities, but if used over long term, can make you go insane. And those who took Adam and ended up going insane are referred to in the beginning of the game and throughout as splicers. Now, you get down into Rapture, you discover splicers, and immediately you get a radio message from a man with an organization called Atlas. And he tells you that he's willing to help you. He'll help you stay alive, but you have to save his family. And immediately as a player, some people are very suspect, like why would this random voice from afar want to save me or have any reason to help me? Even the way that he discusses his family, the way that he talks about needing to save them, doesn't feel very genuine. Now, Andrew Ryan catches the wave that you are here, you've entered Rapture, and he's not sure how you did it because there's security that prevents people from entering. And he believes that you are an agent and that you were sent to try to take over. So he sends security to try to stop you. You discover something called the Big Daddy. And, everyone's thinking the same thing. What the heck, Big Papa? How did he get here? What's the deal? I don't get it. And why's he got this little sister? So to keep it as simple as possible, Big Daddies just guard the little sisters. And the little sisters were created to harvest Adam from bodies, from humans. We do know that the little sisters were also created. They were originally human, but their genes have also been altered so that they follow this instinct need to harvest Adam. Now we introduce a character called Fontaine. Now Fontaine, during Andrew Ryan's reign, created a criminal empire in Rapture under Ryan's nose during this time. Now, he creates this criminal empire and he's planning on revolting. He's going to take over Rapture. So Ryan finds out and tries to kill him in a shootout. Now, he fails at killing him, and then Fontaine begins a civil war. And that war ends up being what destroys Rapture and puts it in the state that we know it in the game. Now, if we back up 2 years, Fontaine was able to acquire an embryo to Ryan's illegitimate child. Think about that for a second. I'm not sure how this all came to be, but let's just say Fontaine was somewhere where he shouldn't have been, and Ryan was also doing a little something he shouldn't have been. But needless to say, a scientist named Tenenbaum, who was working with Fontaine at the time, thinking that he wanted the best for everyone, she was the first to unlock the potential of Adam, and then she grew this embryo of Ryan's into adulthood just throughout the 2 years that passed. So within 2 years, she grew this embryo into an adult with the power of Adam. She did this because she originally worked for Ryan, but believed that Fontaine had better intentions for the people of Rapture. Then once Fontaine sees that this embryo has become an adult, he sends it to the surface to join the rest of humanity and wait for his call to take over Rapture. And guess what? You, Jack Ryan, turned out to be that embryo, turned into child, turned into adult, with Tenenbaum mom, kind of Ryan dad. It's all very confusing. However, you are that embryo. So you are that slave, that adult that Fontaine has control over. That is the reason why you were able to enter into Rapture originally, is because you have Andrew Ryan's DNA in you. Now, where things get real scary here, stay with me. The real sauce is that Atlas never existed, and that who is representing Atlas, pretending to be, putting on this front, is actually Fontaine. Fontaine never actually died originally, and he has been mind controlling you the entire time with his famous saying, "Would you kindly?" Now, he makes you kill Andrew Ryan, and that's a very, very famous sequence that the developers even said they made the Andrew Ryan scene as one of their first scenes ever to build the game around. And you go through that, and that's when Fontaine makes you kill Andrew Ryan with his own golf club. After you kill Andrew Ryan, Atlas, who's actually Fontaine, reveals himself to you and tells you that you're a slave and that you can't make any of your own decisions and that he has control over you, X, Y, and Z. However, you have Tenenbaum on your side, and if you've been making the right choice, you've been saving the little sisters. So they decide that they will help you get revenge and kill Fontaine to stop the madness. Now, this is where the two endings come into play. You make the choice of either saving the little sisters or harvesting them and killing them. And if you choose to save them, then you get the good ending of the game. And obviously, if you kill them, you get the bad ending. Now, you discover Fontaine, and he's an atom-charged humanoid kind of Hulk-looking thing, and that's where your final boss fight happens, and it's all very epic, but slightly underwhelming because you're really expecting it to be crazy, but then it's not. However, if you chose to save the little sisters and get the good ending, then you emerge at the surface with the little sisters, and you've almost developed a family for yourself because you were created in a lab just like all of them were. And now you finally have a family with them, and it's all very sunshine and roses. And I mean, I loved it. I thought that ending was amazing. However, if you decide to kill the little sisters, then you come out in a nuclear sub and chaos breaks out on the surface and war spreads and it's all horrible. My final thoughts on the game ended up being that for the game that it is, for 2007, like I told you, picture yourself there. I think the game is really amazing. And the passion that the developers had behind creating the game and creating what it ended up becoming was something to admire no matter how you felt about the actual game itself. These people were so passionate and had such incredible ideas and refined them so well that it's just, at this point, you can appreciate the artists, Even if you don't love the art, the artists alone are incredible. So I would recommend looking into some of those interviews if you haven't ever watched them or if you have any interest in seeing them. But the developer's passion for the game and the animation's head, his passion for the game is just amazing to see. And you can definitely feel that throughout the game, that they cared so much and that they refined so many little things. Now, I spoke about it during my actual playthrough, but there are sections of the game that feel very puzzle piece-esque, where you feel forced to do them, but it's just because the game is very linear. There are sections like all the mini boss fights where you feel like the only reason why I'm doing this is so I can get, a new weapon or so that I can just get through this door. And that style of game development was super, super common back then. And it's gotten much, much more refined in modern games with open world ideas, and just the better the technology has become, the more freedom those game developers have gotten. So if you think about this in 2007, we're talking about Assassin's Creed, Halo 3. They're also very linear games where you feel like you don't have many choices because that's just how games were made back then. So if you think about that, you take that into account. I still don't think it justifies some of the scenes that were in the game. However, I give it a pass. I give it a pass because I think it makes sense for the time. The world of Rapture is what I think I enjoy the most. The art style, the ideas behind it, the music, the time period, the weaponry, the characters that have been built. It's all something to just admire from afar. So that part of the game is something that I think anyone can really appreciate, no matter how you felt about the story. I think the story was a little bit lackluster. Once you had passed the scene of Andrew Ryan's death and figured out the big twist that Atlas was Fontaine the entire time, for me, it felt like that would have been a great place to end the game, where you realize that you never had a choice the whole time and that you were always a slave, and that Fontaine does have control. He's like the new Andrew Ryan, and that feels like the real concept behind the game, what the game was really trying to accomplish. So if they would have ended it right after that sequence of Atlas coming back on and just admitting that he's Fontaine, telling you've never had a choice, I feel like that would have really, really hit home for most players. And granted, it would have been disappointing for most players to know that you really did all this work and had no payoff. I don't know. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff where they leave you just wanting, and that's a feeling I don't think you get in many games. Final thoughts would be that it truly is a masterpiece for the time. And if you have the chance to play it, or maybe this just sparks you to play it again, I think it's absolutely worth it. If you want to drop some cool knowledge bombs in the comments, because I don't know everything about BioShock, I just know that the general ideas. Please do that. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, maybe subscribe if you enjoyed it and you maybe want to come back for more. I can't say that these particular videos come out too frequently, but I'm very, very interested in continuing general game reviews. I really have fun with this kind of stuff. I really appreciate all the feedback from you guys. Without further ado, I'll let you get on to the next one. You have a great one. Farewell.